So today we're gonna make this bag and I'm so excited about it. This is a free pattern that I've been working on for a little while and it is the perfect project to start with if you've never sewn anything before. It's completely made up of rectangles and it's super simple to construct, but it has some great little skill building features like these two darts here, and it is fully lined inside and it's just a great little bag. If you want to know how to make it, just keep watching. So here's what you're going to need to make this bag. You're going to need 1 yard of medium to heavyweight fabric, 5/8 of a yard of lining fabric, matching thread, and interfacing is optional. For the main fabric, I suggest using something like a canvas or a denim as the bag needs some structure to it. And for the lining, I would use a quilting cotton or a thinner woven fabric. The pattern comes with a downloadable PDF print at home file so that you can print out the pieces and tile them together and cut them out that way, or you can also just use the dimensions, which I provide in the instructions as well. But if you want to just screenshot these dimensions, these are the pieces that you'll need to cut out. If you do print the pattern out at home, it's going to look a little bit like this. Each page is going to have a border, and you're going to want to trim off the left and bottom borders of each page. And after that, we're going to tile them together with some glue or tape. Making sure they're in the right order, you're going to use those diamonds to align the pages so that they fit together nicely. There's a print guide in the instruction booklet, but the numbers and the letters on the pages will tell you what column and row each page goes in. Once all the pages are assembled, you can cut out all your pattern pieces by cutting along the lines. And I like to cut darts out like this. I cut one side of the dart leg, and then I fold the dart over on the other leg. So it's super easy to mark them on your fabric. For this video, I just used the dimensions and measured out each piece with my measuring tape and then cut them all out. If you do cut these pieces out just using dimensions, you're going to have to mark in the darts on your own, and you'll just do this by folding the bag body piece in half lengthwise and just marking a notch there. Then measure out 3 inches from that center point to the right and to the left and mark that in. Then mark down 4 inches from each of those points and place a mark. And then we're going to mark in the dart legs. And the dart legs are going to be 1/2 inch from each side of those second marks that we placed that were 3 inches from the center. If this is confusing, you can just print out this piece and it will show you where the darts are and you can just mark them directly on the fabric. But there are diagrams and written instructions on how to mark these in as well, which might be a little bit more clear. And once you're done that, you're just going to repeat that on the other main bag body piece as well as both of the lining pieces. And here are all the pieces cut out and marked. You should have 2 for the main, 2 for the lining, 2 straps, and 3 pieces for the bow. The first step is to sew the darts. So we've marked them on the wrong sides of the fabric, and I'm just taking pins and inserting them into the legs of the dart, and then I'm going to fold the dart in half and then push the pins vertically. I find that this makes it a lot easier to pin them. So your fabric should be right sides facing. So we're going to sew the dart from the raw edge down to the point. And when you reach about 1 inch from the dart, decrease your stitch length to about 1.5 and then leave long thread tails to tie in a knot at the end. And once you've sewn all of your darts, press them towards the center with an iron. And next you're just going to repeat the same exact thing on both of your lining pieces. Once that's all done, you're going to take your main bag body pieces and place them right sides together and pin along the sides and the bottom. We're going to sew all the way around here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and make sure to back tack at the beginning and at the end. And you'll just sew in one continuous line, pivoting at the corners. Now we're going to trim off our corners and we're going to box them out. So what you're going to want to do is grab the fabric on either side and pull it out so it makes like a little tent. Then we'll just flatten out that seam allowance. I place a little pin to go through both sides of the seam so I know that the seams are laying exactly on top of each other. And you can also press this if that helps. And now we're going to lay our ruler on there and find where it's 2 inches across. And we're going to mark that line with our fabric marker. Then we're going to take that to the sewing machine and just sew along that line, making sure to back tack at the beginning and the end. Once that's done, it's going to look a little bit like this, and then we're going to trim off the excess. Then you'll just repeat that process to box out the other corner of the main body. And then we're going to repeat the entire thing for the lining. So you're going to sew those lining pieces right sides together first, but make sure to leave a 3 to 4 inch gap in the lining as we're going to have to turn the bag out through this hole later. And then you'll box out the 2 corners of the lining as well. I also ended up trimming the corners a little bit differently for the lining. I cut out this little square piece and I found that I like that a little bit better for sewing the box corner, so you can try either way and see what you like better. And next we're going to sew our straps together. So we're going to fold them in half lengthwise, and this is optional, but if you want the ends to be pointed, just mark down 2 inches from one end of the strap and draw a diagonal line from the top to that marking and then just trim off that excess. So to sew the strap, we're going to sew along that top edge and then pivot and sew all the way down the long edge, leaving the bottom open. And we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. And once we're done sewing both straps, we're going to trim off the edges and make sure to trim off that corner so it's nice and sharp. Then we're going to flip these straps right side out. I found this a little bit tricky as my fabric is pretty heavyweight, so I used a pen to get it started, and I just place my fabric over top of the pen and use the pen to push the end out of the open end of the strap. And once it's turned right side out, I use a pin to just pull out that corner so that it's nice and sharp. And next we're going to just press that nice and flat and make sure you pull the seams out to the center so that everything looks nice and neat. Once our straps are nice and pressed, we're going to fold them in half and just place a mark at that center point with a fabric marker. Then we're going to take our bag and turn it right side out, and then we're going to take our strap and use the marking that we just placed on the center and match it up with the side seam of the bag. Pin it in place and repeat with the other strap. Then we'll baste them in place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're ready to add the lining, but first we want to pin the straps out of the way so that we don't sew over them. So at this point, your bag should be right sides out, and we're going to place it inside the lining, which should be wrong sides out. So the right side of the lining and the main bag should be facing each other. Then we're going to match up the side seams and the darts and just pin it all together along the top edge. And now we're going to take it to the machine and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around the top. I found it easier to remove the base of my machine so I could use the free arm for this part as it's a little bit narrow. Okay, once you're done sewing that, your bag should look like this, and we're going to turn the bag out through the gap that we left in the lining earlier. This part can be a little tricky, especially if you have a pretty heavy fabric for the main body of your bag, but just go slowly and pull it out gently from that hole. So this is what your bag should be looking like, and now we're going to want to press the top of the bag nice and flat so the lining doesn't peek out. And then we're going to add a top stitch around the top of the bag. I sew this at about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch from the top. Alright, so now we're going to want to close that hole that we turned the bag through. So you're going to push that seam allowance to the inside and then pin it in place. And then we're going to top stitch it closed, or alternatively you can also hand stitch this so that it's invisible. So at this point your bag is almost done, and if you don't want to add the bow, it is done. So if you like it plain, you can leave it like this, but I'm going to show you how to add the bow if you want to do that. So we have 3 pieces for the bow: the top of the bow, the legs of the bow, and the center of the bow. And we're going to sew these all the same way. For the bow top, you're going to fold it in half so that the short sides are touching, and then we're going to sew all along each of the raw edges, leaving a 2 or 3 inch gap. For the bow center, you're going to fold it long side to long side, sew all along the raw edges, again leaving a gap. And for the bow bottom, we're going to fold it long side to long side, so in half widthwise, and sew along those raw edges again, leaving a 2 to 3 inch gap. And we're sewing these with a 1/2 inch seam allowance again, and once you have them all sewn, you're going to trim all of the edges, making sure to clip the corners well, and then we're going to turn them right sides out. Turning these out can be a little bit tricky, so it can be helpful to use something like a pen or a marker like I used before for the straps, or you can also use a chopstick. And for the corners, I use some tweezers to pull them out, or you can use a pin again just to pull them out and make them nice and sharp. And once they're all turned to the right side, you're going to want to give them a really good press and make sure you fold the seam allowance to the inside for each of the gaps. Once you've pressed them well, we're just going to close up all of those gaps. Again, you can top stitch this, or you can slip stitch by hand if you want it to be invisible. And we are finally at the last step. We're going to assemble the bow now. So you're going to take the top of the bow and the legs of the bow and kind of scrunch them together, and take the smaller middle piece and wrap it around the center of the bow. And then at the back, you're just going to overlap the ends of the center and hand stitch this closed. I used a whip stitch here to close it up. I passed a few of the stitches through the actual bow pieces themselves, but in hindsight, I think a better idea would be to use some thread and wrap it around the middle of the bow and tie it in a knot before sewing the small center on top. And now we're at the very last step. We're going to pin the bow to the front of the bag. So find a placement that you like and place a pin in the top corners as well as the center, as well as one in each of the legs of the bow. Then we're just going to grab another needle and thread and hand sew these in place. You don't need to go too crazy with stitching these in place, but I would do about 5 to 10 stitches in each spot, and I would probably use a doubled up thread just to make sure it's really secure. Alright, so that is it. Your bag is done. You can give it a final press and it is ready to go. I hope you love this pattern as much as I do. I hope you enjoyed today's video and I hope you love this pattern. If you want to grab it, the link to download is in my bio. You just have to subscribe to my newsletter and you will get access to the pattern files. If you make this bag, I would love to see it, so definitely tag me if you make it. If you liked this video, I would love it if you liked and subscribed. I'll have the next episode of the Learn to Sew series up really soon. I'm hoping next week, and it's gonna be all about threading your machine, sewing your seams, basic sewing terms, and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.